Okay, in R, variables are separated into 4 classes. You can think of them as types of variables, but the term used in R is variable classes. And the 4 types or classes are numerics, integers, logical, and characters. Numerics and integers are both your quantitative variables, integers just being integer values, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Numerics being any numbers, right? So including decimal values. So 1.36 is a numeric, 1 or 2 is an integer. Logical variables are either true or false. Sometimes these are called Boolean variables. And then lastly, characters are variables that are text. So if you have categorical data, that would go in as characters. If you want to know the class of a variable, you can just ask R. So you can use this function, class, and then in parentheses, put the variable of interest, and it will report out what type of variable or what class of variable it is. Okay, now to create variables, we can use 1 or 2 different assignment methods. And one is to use like a left arrow, or to make a left arrow. So that's saying that x is taking the value of 2, so the value of 2 is going to x. Or you can just say x equals 2. Now, this is the more straightforward, maybe the more natural way for us. Historically, the way R was developed, at first equals was being used in a slightly different way in other places, and so this was used as the variable assignment indicator. If you use one or the other, it doesn't really make a difference as far as the code is concerned. Although people who work in R, like R developers, tend to use the left arrow as their assignment method. But I'll show you that both work just fine. So let's start here with 2 variables, x and y. I want to make x have the value 2, and I want to make y have the value 5. If I highlight both of these here and hit Control Enter to run them, I will create 2 variables, x with the value of 2 and y with the value of 5. Now when I look in environment, I have those 2 variables. And note here that they show up the same way. So x is a variable with the value 2, y is the variable with the value 5. And it doesn't matter that I assigned one way and one the other way. Okay, so that's assigning variables. Either use the left arrow or the equal sign. And to make the left arrow, you're just really using an angle bracket and then a dash symbol on your keyboard. Okay. Once you've created variables, you can do calculations with them just as we were doing before. So we can do x times y, 2 times 5, run that, and we get 10. All right, so once they're created, variables can be used in calculations. Now, let's just check. I made quantitative variables here. I made numeric variables. But let's just check what class variable x is. So I type class of x, Control Enter, and it tells me that it's a numeric. So now I know that I have a numeric variable. If I make another type of variable, let's say I want to make a character variable. Then to do that, I need to put the text that I want to use in quotes. So here I'm defining a variable z to be equal to the word hello. And it knows it's a character because I've put it in quotes. So when I hit Control Enter, we see here that value shows up in my variable list. And then if I run what is the class of z, it tells me down here that it's a character. All right, so using variables in calculations, defining different types of variables or different classes of variables. What if I tried to mix the two? What if I try to do like x times z? What is it going to tell me? Well, it can't do that. It doesn't know what 2 times hello means, and so it gives you an error message. So the type of variable does matter, right? You can't do calculations with character variables. What we've done here is create a variable with a single value. That's called a scalar. And that's one way to assign a variable. You can give it one single value. If you have data, like imagine having a column of data, for each variable, you have a whole list of values. And so instead of inputting it as a scalar, assigning one value, you might want to assign it a list of values. That's a vector. And so we can define vectors in the same way using the same assignment notation, but we use this function called concatenate, meaning combine together in a list, and its function name is C. So to create a vector, we use C, and then in parentheses, put the things that will be elements of the vector. So I've done here two vectors, V and W, and when I run them, I'll create two new vectors. And so this is telling me here that I've created those vectors with numeric entries. One has values 1, 2, 3, and the other has values 1, 1, 1. Now creating vectors is the same process as creating scalar variables, and you can do arithmetic with them as well. So I can add two vectors together, V plus W. That just adds those two vectors. So 1, 2, 3 plus 1, 1, 1 gives me 2, 3, 4. Right, so you can do vector multiplication and addition and such with this, which comes in handy. All right. We can also combine variable types. Now, meaning not variable types, but variable, scalar, and vector to do algebra. So I can do x times v because it's all numeric. And so it knows how to multiply a number times a vector, a scalar times a vector. And so if I do x, which remember x had value 2, times the vector 1, 2, 3, I get the vector 2, 4, 6. So you can multiply everything in a vector by some number if you'd like to do that. Now lastly, once you have vector information, and remember, think of this as like a long column of data, could be stored in a vector, you might want to find statistical information about that data. And so here are some of the statistical summary data that you might want to know. The first is the length, which is how many entries are there in the vector. The sum, adding all of the elements of the vector. The mean, taking the mean, the arithmetic mean or the average. SD, you can probably guess, is the standard deviation. And then maximum and minimum values. So let's finish by running all of those together and look at the output. Okay, so down here we have the length of this vector v is 3. That means it has 3 elements. So this is kind of like your sample size if you're thinking that as a data set. The length of the vector would be the sample size. The sum, they add to 6. The average value is 2. The standard deviation is 1. The max is 3. And the min is 1. Okay, so we've defined some variables of different types, numerics, characters, so using numbers and text, and then define variables that are vectors, used those with arithmetic, and done some summary statistics. So now we can do lots of different calculations. In the next video, we'll think more about the structure of working in RStudio by looking at our scripts and how we can use those and use them to make our work more efficient and organized.